Welcome viewers, Pro-Theologist Exclusive, Dr. JWA. This was disorderly, intrusive harassment at the edge of a life-saving fundraiser. A brain cancer function is not a political battlefield for thugs. It is a room where families, patients, doctors, donors and supporters gather around one urgent purpose: survival. People were there because brain cancer destroys lives. It steals speech, memory, movement, time. Families attend these events carrying grief most protesters will never see. So when demonstrators, pro-Palestinian demonstrators, swarm the front of the venue, shout over the night, intimidate arrivals, and turn a medical charity event into a political spectacle, the complete Palestinian moral claim collapses. Whatever cause they claim to represent, their behaviour placed disruption above compassion. The mask has slipped off viewers. They were not confronting power. They were intruding on suffering. There is a line between lawful protest and predatory timing, and this has been crossed. Because when activism targets the atmosphere around cancer families, it no longer looks like justice. It looks like entitlement. A fundraiser built to save lives should have been protected from political aggression. Instead, people already carrying fear and grief had to walk through hostility. These thugs, these pro-Palestinian protest thugs that have turned Australia upside down. And that's not courage. That is harassment dressed as conviction. And when protests invade the perimeter of human suffering, it stops speaking for justice and starts revealing disorder.
Racism, bigotry and Islamophobia, shame!
We invited the Prime Minister, the Leader of the Opposition, and Pauline was the only one who responded in positive ways.
However, Ms Hanson never showed, her party claiming her flight was cancelled. Protesters swarmed overnight where plenty of A-listers had gathered for a charity ball hosted by controversial neurosurgeon Charlie Teo. They weren't there for him though, instead picketing against One Nation leader Pauline Hanson.
Racism, bigotry and Islamophobia, shame!
Event yesterday in
I
Sydney.
was there. It was a big event.
To raise money for brain surgery, and all the usual rat bags, tell us about it, were there to protest.
Was, even by the left's very, very low gutter level standards, this was a new low, because we had here people gathering to raise money for research into brain cancer, and because there was going to be Pauline Hanson in attendance, she was going to support this charity, we had these scenes. Let's just have a quick look.
Riot squad has been called in as a large group of protesters gather outside a high-profile event in Pyrmont where some of the country's biggest names are right now.
The Queensland Senator says she is fearing for her life after receiving text messages threatening her, her family, even her staff.
So people who are attending this event, people who are coming to the Star to go to the Charlie Teo Foundation's Rebel Ball, many of them who've lost loved ones to this terrible cancer, who perhaps are suffering cancer themselves, there were a number of patients there, had to withstand that ugliness. People were shouting abuse and intimidating guests going there to raise money for cancer research. Thank God people still went. More than $1.6 million was raised. So it was a successful night, but in the end, Pauline Hanson didn't attend. And I think we're at a dangerous point in our country when that is allowed to happen. You can protest as much as you like. You can, the freedom to protest is fine, even if your cause is unhinged. But intimidating and shouting threats or abuse at people who are there to raise money, who have perhaps suffered cancer themselves or are suffering it right now, it's a new low. It's a new
disgusting, James.
Well, you know, but it's more than that. It's a new low. It reveals the left, many people on the left, for who they are, which is not very nice and not very good people. These are people who talk about wanting to save the world, wanting to help people, but as soon as they have some sort of excuse to act like real jerks, you know, and they decide, oh, well, Pauline Hanson's presence is enough to give us an excuse to come and act like really unhinged, awful people, we're there. But the point that I think is really interesting about this here, this mob here, this sort of mob, and we're seeing this more and more, we've seen it in recent days, all coming in response to the rise of Pauline Hanson in the polls. Obviously, it shows what a real threat she is to the established order, and I think that's probably a very good thing. But it also shows a real hypocrisy, because these are the first people who will say, don't import American-style culture wars. What is that? That is exactly this sort of American-style mass mobbing cancel culture protest that we've seen all through the Trump administration. I mean, it sounds like the Kavanaugh nomination protest, sounds like a million other things. They're bringing it here.
Yeah, but more important, yeah, I agree with all of that, but also this is the result of the last 2 or 3 years of all that free Palestine nonsense with the fact that the left have realised that they can take over our streets whenever they want. So they'll be bored with Palestine now. They're over that. They've kind of do. Now they'll move on to this. We've got 2 years now this to look forward to. They'll be out there, Pauline Hanson, racist, blah, 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 all this stuff. This will go on and on and on. You're right, James, it will only cement the vote towards Pauline Hanson, but they don't care about that. They've got a new reason to be ratbags, a new reason to disrupt people's lives, a new reason to be hateful, which is the left's main game. How can we show our hate but pretend that it is virtue? And that's their game. They always look for the way to be as vile as humanly possible, to be as disgusting, shouting things at people, but they dress it up as, aren't we virtuous because we're tackling racism.
Oh, we're anti-racist.
Yeah,
I can tell you, if you had right-wing protesters behaving like that, attacking a charity, a cancer charity, intimidating guests of that charity trying to attend a fundraiser, and you would never hear the end of it. It would be front page news. It would be absolutely something that every politician on the right would have to disavow and talk about endlessly. How could you possibly embolden people who are this vile and this hateful? You don't see that same standard applied to the left. You can have these sorts of protests and you don't have Anthony Albanese or the Greens leader being asked, can you condemn this sort of behaviour?
Because they're all on the same side.
Has Albanese come out and condemned the protest yesterday? Have we heard anything from the left? Have they come out?
Not a thing.
Come on, Albo, stand up. You know, come on, Mins, let's hear from you. Let's get you guys out there saying that it was unacceptable what happened in Sydney last night. Let's hear from you.
The protest organisers with a bill, because
Exactly.
there were a lot of cops there trying to control the situation. Why should the taxpayer pay for that? Present them
with the bill for the money that could have been raised if everybody had turned up. That'll soon shut them up.
I just got home from an event in Sydney. A fundraiser. Not a political fundraiser. For a charity. For brain cancer. The most incredible surgeon, Dr. Charlie Teo, who pulls off the unthinkable miracles. People who are given a month, he gives 10 years, sometimes longer. It was full of the most incredible people. And I'll tell you a little bit more about them in just a second. But guess who was there as well? Guess who had gathered out the front of a brain cancer fundraiser? So this is a charity event for brain cancer, and we have this out the front for brain cancer. So just to give you an insight as to who these people are, so we just heard the swearing. This is a Charlie Teo brain cancer fundraiser. There will be children here who have brain cancer. There will be survivors. There will be parents who lost children at this event. It is to raise money for brain cancer. This is how low their standards are, how vile they are, how disgusting they are. A brain cancer fundraiser, and they are swearing and abusing people walking in. It is disgusting.
Yes, aren't they disgusting? Right.
The mob. Protesters, but they're not. They're not protesters. The pro-Palestinian antagonists. Swearing and abusing people as they walked in. Again, not a political fundraiser for brain cancer. Now, they had invited politicians. They invite all politicians every year, plus Australia's richest woman, Gina Rinehart, who has donated so much and saved countless lives. Countless lives. Parents who have buried children were subjected to profanity and abuse because they wanted to help raise money to save other children and other parents from the same fate. This is who they are. They do not give about anyone, about humanity, about suffering. They want to cause hate and they want to divide. They are vile. This mob, outside a brain cancer fundraiser, waved their Palestinian flags because they don't care about Palestinians, though, do they? Because let me tell you, not one child in Gaza will be helped by swearing and abusing a parent who has lost a child to brain cancer who has nothing to do with it. They expose themselves every time, yet people still fall for their crap. It drives me crazy. There is a time and a place, and this was not it.
What happened outside the fundraiser should disturb far more people than it currently does. Because this was never simply about noise or disruption or protest. It was about the collapse of boundaries that once protected human suffering from political intrusion. Think about what that means. A room filled with people trying to fund research against one of the most devastating diseases known to medicine. Families who have watched loved ones lose speech, lose memory, lose movement, lose dignity, lose life. Parents who have buried children, children who have buried parents. People desperately hoping that the next breakthrough arrives before the next funeral. And into that atmosphere comes the willfully blind pro-Palestinian horde. Not against the disease, not against the suffering, what looks like just against each other. And this is the deeper danger. A civilization, viewers, begins to fracture when it loses the ability to recognize sacred ground, when everything becomes political, when every gathering becomes a target, when every cause becomes an opportunity for ideological warfare. And when outrage becomes incapable of restraint, the consequence is far greater than one disrupted evening. It signals the emergence of a society where activism no longer asks, should we? Only, can we? And that distinction is catastrophic. Because once a movement loses the capacity to recognize the difference between confronting power and invading suffering, it begins consuming its very own moral legitimacy. The disease becomes secondary, the patients become secondary, the grieving becomes secondary, the fundraiser becomes secondary, and everything becomes subordinate to the pro-Palestinian horde spectacle, to their visibility and noise, the noise of the pro-Palestinian, willfully blind horde, to their emotional domination, to their need to be seen. And when that happens, viewers, the protest ceases to be a voice for justice. It becomes another form of social aggression, another force demanding that everybody else surrender their moment, their grief, their dignity, and their humanity to its demands. A healthy society protects the sick. A fractured society weaponizes their surroundings. And that's why this matters. Because the true measure of a civilization is not how loudly it speaks about compassion, it's whether compassion remains protected while political passions become inflated. The moment a movement is willing to trample the perimeter of human suffering to amplify itself, that movement, the pro-Palestinian hordes, are no longer revealing injustice. They're revealing their own moral collapse. I'm Dr. JWA, youth theologist. Bye for now.